it that way because it's the right way. Don't ever question me again.
Well, give me a minute.
Not ever again. I've got it down. I know the stuff. Welcome to Rebloggatog episode 7.
7.
Lucky 7.
That's close.
I suppose. These are not local. These are locals. Yeah, they know. Some of them might know. It's been a while since we had a Lucky 7 or a Pastime or a Skid Row.
That's true.
So, you know, if you're going to drink in this town, you got to eat. Or you got to go home.
Oh, we got to go home.
So anyway, we're back again with a breakdown of the last week's worth of Bloggatog, Mark Rosewater's Tumblr account, where he talks about the goings-on of making magic and answers a lot of questions. So we endeavor every week to bring you what I've culled down to be the creme de la creme. Creme de la creme. Creme de la creme.
Are you okay?
I'm hinky dunky, so let's get this thing rolling. You can edit all this out if you want. You're the editor.
I am.
You can voice over it. You can do whatever.
I should start doing voiceover for you.
You should. So anyway, picking up from a week ago.
Yep.
What sort of considerations go into the relation between a card's flavor and whether it's pushed to see competitive play? Shark Typhoon, being a direct reference to an in-copyright, non-magic property, and based on, frankly, a pretty stupid idea, is a card that feels very unwelcome in Standard purely on flavor grounds. Speaking as someone who very much appreciates it mechanically. He says we tend to push cards because they're fun to play.
Good reason.
Also, remember the card you creatively dislike is a card someone else loves for the very reasons you don't like it. And that's something we could all do a better job of. If you find a card that you just absolutely despise, somebody loves it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's very unusual that everyone dislikes a card. It's probably impossible. Probably impossible. So just remember that. Chill a little bit the next time you get irate about a certain card and just think, there are people who enjoy this. I don't have to play it. I got to play against it, but I don't have to play it in my deck.
You don't.
So, yeah. Hey, Mark, which color would be secondary in using life to pay for spells? Obviously, aside from Phyrexian mana, and in a totally hypothetical sense. I was kind of amazed. He thinks blue is secondary, but it's a distant second to black. I should have looked. I was going to see if I could find a single blue non-Phyrexian spell where you paid life to cast it.
Force of Will.
Force of Will. There's one.
That was the first thing that came to my mind when he said
all right,
blue.
There's one. Okay. And then a follow-up to that is green wouldn't be secondary in paying with life? Some of the strongest green spells ever, like Fast Bond and Channel, involved paying life. Alpha is not the best indicator of modern color pie.
He's absolutely correct there.
That is correct, but those are two green cards, and you can name one blue.
That's true. That is true.
I believe there's a couple of red spells where you pay life.
Yeah,
there's like a counter spell where you bid life.
Yeah.
A red counter spell. I can't think of the name of that right now.
Mage's Contest?
Could be Mage's Contest, yeah.
There's a lot of those that are very similar.
Yeah. So, there's some oddball thingamajiggers out there.
You're right.
I'm from the Midwest. We say thingamajiggers, and if you don't like that, I got some others for you. Wait till I get something a little cattywampus, and we'll talk about that. So the card Aladdin was made in Arabian Nights before Legendary was a thing. But why hasn't it been errated since then to be Legendary?
I love this answer.
Because we don't errata things to be Legendary. There are some Nephilim fans that can fill you in.
Yeah.
People have been wanting the Nephilims errated for years.
Since they were printed. Since it's
so
Commander.
they can have 4-color commanders. We now have 4-color commanders,
right.
But they still want the Nephilims errated, and they don't do that kind of errata. No. Which is kind of odd that they draw the line there. Since they've errated creature type. They've errated almost everything else.
Right.
But no. We're not gonna
Legendary.
We're not gonna give, or I guess take, I don't know if they take Legendary away from anybody. I don't know why that would need to happen.
Right.
But they don't do that. So there's your answer. I'm not complaining. You know, every time I see that, it makes me think somebody's going to complain.
What's he complaining about?
I get that mutate being for non-humans was mostly a mechanical decision. It's just funny how Vidalcan, Core, Spirits, and even Illusions can mutate. If the sets had aligned better, I think it would have made more sense to mutate onto non-artifact creatures, right? And he puts that right with a question mark, like, I nailed it, didn't I? Mark just tells him that Magic already has a monster world called Innistrad. We wanted to keep a clear delineation from it. All its monsters transform from humans, so on Ikoria, all our monsters transform from non-human. I think we went over that either last week, the week before, maybe it was on Chatter we talked about it. But I know we've talked about it before.
Right. Well, it's there's a big mechanical reason as well, and maybe this guy is speaking from the other side of the aisle. Maybe he's a modern Humans player.
Oh, maybe.
Humans is the biggest tribe in the history of Magic. So cutting it out immediately, and it is one of the only tribes that has a whole archetype, powerful archetype, built around it, and it's an ability they don't have access to.
You never heard of an elf deck?
Well, that's true.
Goblin deck?
Still competitively in modern, anyway. Modern Humans. I still hear about it.
I don't know. So now we need a competitive non-human deck.
There you go.
Competitive mutate. Hard to do with just one set that's going to have it. So, all right. What's the cutoff date currently for all of the cards from this point forward are representative of the modern color pie?
That's a tough
like
question.
the set after the last set with a card that was clearly a break. Mark sets him straight, says the color pie is always in flux, but the last 5 years is usually pretty close. So
5 years takes you back to Zendikar. Last time we hit Zendikar.
I don't know.
That seems right.
Once you start making some notes beforehand, and you'll know stuff like
that would take the fun out of it.
I'd have to count back with fall sets. So, so last fall was Eldraine. The fall before that
was something Ravnica.
was Ravnica. The fall before that was
End of Ixalan, something Ixalan.
So Ixalan. The one before that was Kaladesh. And the one before that would have been Shadows over Innistrad.
Shadows over Innistrad.
So from Shadows forward, approximately?
5 years, roughly.
All right, so now you can tell me there's something broke in there?
I will soon.
Yeah, okay. Well, prepare that for next week, and then we'll forget all about it. What happens to one-off cards designed and card designs that get rejected for the set they were made for? Do they get compiled into a list of designs that can be used for future sets? He says it's not quite that formalized, but we remember most of the good stuff that didn't get used. It's also common for designers to resubmit stuff for new sets.
That kind of made me sad, that answer did, to be honest. Like, I kind of imagine, like, there's this one filing cabinet, like this bottom drawer that, like, oh crap, we need a card, right? And there's all these designs that didn't quite make it. They're like, well, let's see what we have.
I think maybe he just didn't want to answer for all the designers, but I think Mark Rosewater has that cabinet.
Right.
I think he definitely does. When he says, last week we were talking about he designed some companions for an unset.
There we go.
He definitely has a cabinet for uncards.
That's true.
He definitely has that.
That's true.
But past that, I think, and then the man just has a pretty good memory, seems like.
That's true. Like
he's always talking about stuff that I'm like, what?
I just like the image of, like, we need one more card. I don't know how we ended up a card short. Wait, there's a file. I bet one of these, that one.
This is the last card I was really skeptical about Ikoria when it was first announced, but having tried it, I have to say that it's not only really fun, but also really original. It's great to have such a breath of fresh air in Magic, and I really hope we get to see more innovation like this in the future. And he responds, I have some good news for you, with a little smiley face.
Yeah, I wonder what... Our next set is a Teferi set. I don't know if
it's a core set. You don't get a ton of innovation in core.
I hope not.
And then
it's based on Teferi. I don't need any more of that kind of innovation.
And then we got Zendikar. There can't be a ton of innovation because it's a known place.
It's a return.
It's a return. So, But anyway, I mainly did this because a little bit we're going to get to some stuff that's maybe not as pleasant and jolly as that one. So we'll continue on now.
Little smiley faces are nice right now.
Why does black oscillate between deals damage to you and you lose life? As examples, Dark Bargain versus Funeral Rites.
Right.
And for a very short time, and of course people notice this, we were experimenting with lining up black and red with one template, but we decided we preferred it back the way it was. So they were trying to remove the lose life part of black and just give it damage dealing like red had. But I didn't like it. I'm glad they didn't like it either.
Right.
And I'm glad we're back to doing it the old way because it's much more flavorful and it helps separate red from black.
It does. It does a good job at that.
After playing with their red-white cycling deck, I found it interesting that cycling is the most pushed in these colors, including being the red-white draft archetype. Normally, these two colors are the weakest in card draw, and cycling gets around that to some extent. Is there a reason that cycling was decided to be strongest in these colors? It saves time when people answer their own questions.
Yeah.
That would tickle me pretty good.
I thought that was a pretty good answer.
He just answered his own question. That's why we designed it that
why
way.
we did it, guys.
All right, so is this the... No, all right. I thought this was neat. Would it be possible for question marks to update your FAQ for you? Because this FAQ is way out of date. And it's huge, okay?
Yeah, it's huge and it's way out of date.
Maybe they couldn't handle all the personal stuff, but it seems like your most dedicated fans probably know most of the answers. Would have a good sense about things to add, themes that keep getting repeated over and over again, and could research the archives when they're unsure. It could be done in a wiki format, with you only having to check it, approve it, and transfer it to Blogatog. And he says, if someone could help with that, I'm game. Now, a little later on the next day, someone posted the MTG Wiki is available for the FAQ project. And he says, let's talk about how to make this work. So I'm anxiously looking forward to an updated FAQ that has some question marks working on it, the MTG Wiki people, and that maybe stays up to date. Because if you look at the short list on it, we've done over half of the short list.
Yeah.
So I would really like to see... I'd like to see that get done. So this is a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Congrats and kudos to the people that are going to make this happen.
Take the initiative to get that done.
Exactly. Does Ikoria being wedge-colored reduce the chances of a return to Tarkir? Tarkir was one of my first sets, and I'd love to see what's going on there these days.
Fair.
Sad news. It reduces the chances in the near future, but I have confidence it will return one day. Now... it all hinges on what he means by the near future. Is that in the next 2 years, 3 years? Is it in the 5-year plan? Right. How far out? I mean, 5 years is 15 sets. Is it one of the next 15 non-core sets? I would have to think it's in one of the next 15 non-core sets.
I would think.
Personally. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong a couple times before. Oh, I was just wrong again. I've only been wrong once before.
Oh.
Wait, now it's twice. Oh my gosh, it's 3 times now. I just have to stop. Do you all design cards or mechanics with Arena in mind? I'm asking this because Ikoria's mechanics really seem to shine on Arena, where a lot of the rules tracking and edge cases are handled by the software. He says we're aware of digital magic, but it didn't lead to the design choices for Ikoria. I have seen other magic media places that disagree with this.
I don't want to call Mark Rosewater a liar, but are you sure, Mark? Because it really keyword counters, mutate, it all goes very smoothly on Arena. I have played a sealed event on Arena, so I could actually play with some Ikoria cards. I wanted to see if I was going to be talking about mutate and stuff, so I actually wanted to mutate some creatures and see how the lines of play worked and stuff. And, man, it runs smooth. But I do see, it'll be a little bit of a hassle on paper for a little bit, but it's just smooth as can be.
I do believe some of the other designers have said that they did have digital in mind. And they do use digital play. They do keep it in mind, but this one seems a lot more focused on digital play than we're maybe normally used to.
I would say so.
All right, we're going to jump on a little bit of a...
tangent?
A little bit of a discussion here. I'm going to burn through these probably quicker than I should, but there'll be some discussion, all right? So, Mark, with you having 20 years of experience designing Magic cards, how could you allow for Companion to go to print? During design, did you have any thoughts of the mechanic being too powerful and game-breaking? Okay, first off, class act always. You understand I'm in charge of coming up with cool, flavorful new ideas and not checking to see how balanced those ideas are. That said, let's play a bit with Companions before judging them too powerful and game-breaking.
That's really important, I think.
All right? It is. That said, let's play a bit with Companions before judging them too powerful and game-breaking. As someone who vocally despises Companion, in principle, and finds the gameplay as repetitively tedious as I'd feared, I have to concede that in my experience so far, Companion is a lot less relevant than I'd been afraid it would be. Mm-hmm. We're at the stage where I see a lot of people playing Companion because they can, but I sense a lot of the time they'd be better in the main deck without restrictions.
Yep.
Mark says, thanks for your honest response. It's not going to stay that good.
No, but that was wonderful.
Hello, Mark. Was there any concern that if in the off chance a Companion breaks in Vintage, there isn't really a way to balance it since you usually only need one? Cards can be banned in Vintage if necessary. There's a banned restricted list in the older formats to make sure of that, because they don't play test all the formats. All right, and our last comment, and then we'll discuss. Companion cards are pretty contentious right now. You've mentioned an old mechanic that let you take a penalty to guarantee a certain card in your opening hand, and then it got scratched after its first playtest. And I remember him talking about it a couple years ago. I'm curious why Companion, a similar mechanic, in restricting yourself to guarantee access to a certain card, made it through development while the old mechanic didn't. Let's be clear. Getting to start the game with a card in your opening hand with no restrictions is not the same thing as getting to do so with a major deck construction restriction.
Yes.
If something doesn't work, a very common thing for us to do is try again, but with some kind of restriction to balance it. Maybe when the dust settles, it will turn out that some of the deck restrictions weren't restrictive enough. But there's no way to make an ever-evolving game where we continually create new cards without ever exploring things that didn't work out in the past.
Nicely said.
The first thing I want to point out is that they went through several deck restrictions to end up with the 10 that they did. Mm-hmm. They play tested about, I don't know how many, I don't know if they told us how many,
right.
But lots of them got left on the cutting room floor. If you're a video editor, the cutting room floor is it's filled with stuff. So they did do that. I've been hearing, I haven't got to play with it yet. I don't play digitally. I've been hearing a lot about how busted it is, particularly in older formats.
Right. It's a 8th card in your starting hand.
It's a free 8th card. I get that. I have heard that in limited play it is awesome.
Yeah.
I've heard that's really nice and that standard is probably fine. It's once you get, I don't know about Pioneer, but I've heard some online results that say that there's a lot of them. If you're not playing Pioneer, you're just behind. Or if you're not playing Companion, you're just behind in the older formats.
Luris, I know, is one of the big ones that kind of has made in every format, possibly even standard. He's the one that you have to have. Every permanent in your deck has to have a CMC of 2 or less. And then once he's on the battlefield, you can cast something with CMC 2 or less from your graveyard every turn.
Easy to do in Legacy and Vintage, because that's what your deck is.
That's what your deck already is, so it's a free starting card that lets you recur things out of the graveyard. In Vintage, essentially, you can play your Black Lotus every turn.
Lutry's also pretty good, I think. Yeah. Because you get to fork something, basically. So it's a free fork when you need it, and a body.
The red-white one is 2-card infinite mana with Grim Monolith or Basalt Monolith. So, yeah. And those are all like 3-drop ones.
So it's only been available digitally for a week now?
Yeah, a week.
A week, 10 days, something. So, let's let it play out a little bit. I know there's a lot of strong opinions on it.
There certainly are from what
Let's let it play out. We can always ban cards in Legacy and Vintage. We can ban them in Modern. We can restrict them in Vintage and Legacy. Not just ban, we can restrict.
Yeah.
So let's see where we get to on this stuff.
I think one of the biggest mistakes is with Companion that I can see is with the 3 CMC ones. There's 3 or 4 of them that are 3 CMC. The cheaper ones that are really like a free 8th card in your starting hand. There's the big one that wants you to play all big stuff. He's like a 5 or 6 drop, which is a lot different than having a 3 drop that, depending on your format, you can be playing, really quick. That's a big difference. And I think the low CMC ones are the ones that are going to give more trouble in formats.
Sure. All right, so that's the big beast out of the cage here. Companion, where it's going to land, what it's doing. Time will tell, obviously.
I think this one guy who said it wasn't as powerful as he thought, I think what he says is going to come out to be very true. That a lot of times, after everybody gets over the novelty of having that free 8th card, sometimes it'd just be better in your main deck and not restrict your deck building.
Yeah.
The restriction to your deck building is very real, and I think people aren't acknowledging that yet.
In smaller formats, it's going to be super real.
Right.
Okay. Only even numbers, only odd numbers, less, more than, converted mana cost. Yeah, very real. All right, let's move along then, shall we? Whisper Squad is a super cool card, but it feels white to me, not black. You're recruiting small creatures to form an army. In fact, isn't that kind of a riff on Squadron Hawk? A perfect way to give white card advantage at common? And he says, search for more of me is available to all colors.
Yep.
All colors are able to search up more of a card.
Yeah.
Just like all colors are able to have more than 4 of the rat ability.
We've only ever seen it in black and blue so far.
Black and blue is all that's got it so far, yeah. Could white tutor a non-land permanent with CMC 1? Probably.
I think that's fair. Yeah, probably.
Non-land permanent CMC 1, so he could get an artifact. He could already get an artifact enchantment easy. So
With
getting
Worldly
a 1 casting cost creature. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 casting cost planeswalker.
There isn't one.
There isn't one. So yeah, I don't see what the big deal is there. Hi, Mark. It seems like there is an impassioned minority that has a huge preference against a lot of, in my opinion, very good modern Magic decisions like the black border and new art style, along with some rather strange ideas on card power level. What's the best way to explain to this group that nostalgia can be a little blinding? Again, a great response. I've learned to let people enjoy what they want to enjoy out of the game. I try to be clear, though, what to expect from the future, so there aren't false expectations. Yes, we used to do Thing X, and cards exist that do Thing X, but there aren't any current plans to make more of Things X. So, yep, we got them out there. They're out there, but we're probably not going to do them again.
Well, he doesn't even talk about card. Well, he does mention card power level there a little bit, but like the range he uses is just odd in his questioning because he mentions a black border, which happened an awful long time ago.
But there are people, because there are so few cards in white border.
I guess that's
there are people who have their cards modified to be white bordered.
Do you remember
white border Tarmogoyfs are weird?
Do you remember once upon a time where people don't want to play with anything white border? They wanted the black bordered, you don't want to play with the white bordered version if you could get the black bordered version.
Right.
So
that is true.
It makes me laugh.
Yep. Hi, Mark. Will we see any dwarves in the core set, perhaps? I can't talk about the upcoming core set, but I can say I designed a dwarf card this week. That is the week of April 19th. So
2 years. We're going back to Kaladesh, guys.
Or a world that's got dwarves.
2 years would be around a 5-year timeline for the return, though, too.
Hi, Mark. I know quite a few players are becoming concerned about the pseudo-rotation that has been occurring in Eternal formats due to the printing of hyper-pushed cards in Standards. This is another subject. It seems like it has happened to every set for a while now. Hogak and Urza, Oko, and Once Upon a Time, Veil of Summer, Uro, and now the incredibly game-warping Companion mechanic, granting so many decks free advantage. Is this the effect these cards were intended to have? I'm currently scared for the future of the game I love. Mark says the nature of a trading card game is we make new cards, and those new cards get played in various formats, evolving things.
Yep.
We aren't making new things stronger than cards already in those formats. And to follow up, the banned and restricted list changes over the past couple years would disagree with your assertion that you're making things stronger than what's already in the formats. The joke in my group is that Legacy is now a rotating format. He says, older formats will add to the banned and restricted list if enough new cards get added to the format.
Well,
that's
true.
the nature of how trading card games work. I don't think you're asking to make things so low-powered that new cards never get added to older formats. That's definitely not what you want.
Right.
You don't want any new cards to ever enter the older formats. That means... okay, they're not rotating, but they're never changing because nothing new happens. So I don't think that's what we want.
No.
We want them to push. And the other thing is that new cards aren't necessarily stronger. It's they create synergies with other cards and allow you to do new things that you've never been able to do before.
Well, some new cards are just powerful. I mean, they did list a good set of lists there that were some of them were just powerful cards, but
they are, but
But no, I mean it's totally it's a hard balancing act for what Wizards wants to do and what certain players want. But you can't make everything so low powered that nothing new goes into eternal formats. But also, I don't know. It's a hard balancing act to not make eternal formats feel rotating, I guess. But you do want new cards being injected into older formats at all the time. Cards that are on a power level that can be played. I think people just feel like that number of cards has spiked much more than it once was. And I don't play Legacy
again,
Modern, so
people love different parts about the game.
Right.
I don't see that as a bug. I see it as a feature.
Right.
I mean, because rather than having to scour through a brand new set to hope there's one new Legacy playable,
right.
which I can remember people griping about that. Well, this new set doesn't have anything I can add to my Legacy deck.
Right.
Or doesn't have anything we can add to Vintage. Now you get multiple cards per set. So where do you just want one? You want two? You want one every 3 years?
Right.
Where are you wanting to land? You're not going to satisfy everybody. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's why there's banned restricted list.
Essentially. Yeah.
Hey Mark, would you ever consider Boneyard Lurker to be a bend or break in that it allows black to get back artifacts or enchantments from your graveyard? He says it's a bend. Mm-hmm. We let black do that on rare occasions with certain set themes. And we've talked about this a little bit over the last few weeks since we started doing this, but depending on what the set theme is, they will push colors, bending cards, so that every color can kind of interact with it a little bit.
Right.
I'm sorry if this has been asked before, but what is the highest score a card has gotten on the Storm scale, and what was it?
Cards don't go on the Storm scale, mechanics do. He doesn't address that, but he replies back with a mechanic. So
he does, and this was for comic values, he says, but Bands with Others did get an 11.
Yeah.
So Bands with Others, go look it up, guys.
Yeah.
It's from Legends.
Uh-huh.
It's goofy. Bands was bad. It's never coming back. Bands with Other was even worse.
Yeah, and it wasn't actually. It didn't actually say bands with others on cards. It said like bands with elves, bands with creature types, I believe.
Hello, Mark. I appreciate your time to answer fans' questions and give us insight to the design of Magic. I'd like to ask if FIRE, F-I-R-E, philosophy is an official tenet, and if it is, how it's measured. How do you tell if a version of a card is more fun, that's the F, inviting, replayable, or exciting than another, for example? He says we have a list of questions for each attribute so it can be examined and discussed if it's meeting the criteria. So this is something they just instituted, I believe, last year. This FIRE thing. Is a card fun? Do people enjoy playing with it?
Right.
Is it inviting? When people see it, do they go, ooh, neat?
Yeah.
Is it replayable? Do you just get all the good out of it the first time you play it?
Right.
I think Yargle to some extent. I know Yargle's fun. He's a 9/3. He's got a cool name, but he doesn't have a lot of replayability, okay?
No, he does not.
And then is the card exciting, okay? And so I think with them developing that, I think that would lead us to go that Hogak, Urza, Oko, Once Upon a Time, Veil Summer, and Uro are all fire cards.
Right.
They're fun, they're inviting, they're replayable, and they're exciting.
They are certainly, at least most of those things. Maybe some people that would argue on the fun part with. I don't play Modern, and I didn't play through Hogak, but I heard the stories about Hogak. I don't know.
I don't believe there's a B in fire, so we can't get broken in there.
Right.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. We got about 3 to go. Why is it the original Brushwag is on the reserved list? Now, if you're not familiar with the reserved list, it's cards from the early days up through Urza's block that were, because people got...
Chronicles was printed and people lost their mind.
And 4th edition got printed. People were afraid that the value of their collections is going to go away. So, WotC came up with a reserve list, a list of cards they promised to never, ever reprint in a similar way again. So, the same size, usable,
Right.
They could technically print them as an oversized card or whatever. Anyway, that's what the reserve list is.
Right.
So, Brushwag is a nothing card. But they had a criteria back in the day for the cards that were in print on what to put on the reserve list and what not to.
I was ready to say, the cards that had already been printed, they curated a list of what was already the expensive cards, essentially, to be the reserve list. And new sets, as they were being printed, to be added to the reserve list. There was a certain percentage.
They didn't really curate the most expensive cards.
No, but
so his explanation, it's a rare from a set where I believe about 80% of the rares were on the reserved list. We didn't put it in the 20% as we believed we wouldn't use it in a core set. So one of their criteria was if the rare was something they might want to use in a core set, they didn't reserve it. If it was something that they didn't think they'd ever use in a core set, then they reserved it. And that way, that was one of their criteria.
Right, okay.
Which I had never heard that particular criteria.
Right. I knew that there was... Well, I knew from when they started it, like, there was a percentage or something that so many rares
about 75% I'd always heard
would go onto the reserve list.
But it got smaller towards the end, I know, because if you look. All right, I know Ikoria is the big thing right now, but I was wondering if for planeswalkers like Karn or Calyx, you ever considered having them as artifact planeswalker or enchantment planeswalker. If the fears of having them fetchable, then perhaps a static ability that makes them only be considered those things when on the field? It seems weird that lore-wise, Calyx is an enchantment that can't be interacted with by enchantment spells, and similarly for Karn. He says we tested the original Karn as being an artifact, and it easily broke. Well, I can understand that. If they don't... A planeswalker is a planeswalker. Right. It's not any other thing. I mean... Just think if you could kill Karn with a Shatter, or Calyx with a Naturalize, okay? Or you could get them back with cards that bring enchantments and artifacts back from the graveyard into play. Fragmentize, There's just so many things that you could do that would be super busted.
Very easily busted with Karn, especially being an artifact.
Oh, yeah. The artifact,
But him being... Because he doesn't even have a color... I mean, not that color hosers are huge, but he's a extra protected planeswalker these days because at least they still have colors to target.
Yeah.
That you could hit planeswalkers with color-specific things, but not Karn.
And one last thing I wanted to mention is that someone asked, Mark, is there anything on the official MTG website about the Omaz Make-A-Wish contest? There are a lot of people, websites, forums who don't believe it's real since there are no direct sources. Yes, you're on Make-A-Wish's Twitter and some third-party stuff, but why no Wizards announcement? He says, my assumption was there is one, but it's possible with all the work from home craziness that it slipped between the cracks. So if you didn't know, they announced this past week. Make-A-Wish, you make a donation, you get with this company Omaz that runs this, I guess. Yeah. Make a donation. You get so many entries for this. Whoever wins it's going to get a trip out to the mothership out there. Yeah. They're going to get to go out and design a card, get a tour, get put up for 2 or 3 nights, and get some big royal treatment.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to do that. I can't tell from the rules on there if I'm allowed to enter it or not. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm considered a WotC employee for this. So I haven't entered it, but it's a great thing.
It is.
And you should really check into
I
that.
just heard about this last night, actually, and you started talking about it. I'm like, oh, yeah, they're giving away a trip to, help them make a card with R&D. That's what it is.
You don't mind, it'd have to be a squirrel.
Right.
We got them back in standard. I could do that, man.
You could.
I could.
Good.
I could get it in there.
You need to make a squirrel dragon?
A squirrel dragon?
I just have a picture in my head now.
For when we go back to Tarkir.
You're right. It kind of looks
Abzan.
like looks a little bit like the thing out of Neverending Story, the dog dragon thing.
Ah, okay.
Kind of looks a little similar to that, but yeah, squirrel dragon.
Sure. Anyway, guys, that's what we have for you this week. I appreciate y'all watching. And don't forget to tune in next week for another episode. Check us out, Chatter of the Squirrels, on Facebook Live every Thursday nights at 9:30 Central Time.
Yep.
And we appreciate all of you.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you later.
See ya.